Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I am Brad, here with Doug.
They
Elden Ring got its
hmm
big, major, surprisingly massive
Yeah.
update with
Oh yeah.
Shadow of the Erdtree. Like,
Mm.
in my mind, it's like the Xenoblade 3 Future Connected, where it's like, no, this is just basically a whole other game. Like, we just built a brand new game and we're just calling it DLC add-on.
Yeah. It just kind of feels like they just never stopped making Elden Ring. It just like kept going and going and going, which it kind of helps and hurts the game in a few different ways. But yeah, no, it's massive. They lied about how they just straight up lied about how big the DLC was. I think when I finished, so it took me 100 hours to beat Elden Ring.
Mm-hmm.
It to beat this DLC took me 85 hours. So it's like
So it's shorter, is what you're telling me. It's
short.
just not
Yeah, exactly.
not quite a full game.
Yeah, not quite full. Exactly.
So just to keep everyone aware, you kind
Mhm.
of thought that the best way to talk about this would just be to talk about the things that happen. So we don't normally in our reviews have spoilers, but this will have spoilers for Elden Ring proper and for Erdtree. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. Because I just want to talk about cool stuff, and like, I feel like so if you I mean, my short non-spoiler review. If you like Elden Ring, get Shad the Erdtree. Review over. Like that's. But yeah, I just want to talk about the cool stuff in it, and like trying to dodge what makes it cool because it plays on a lot of expectations of like what Elden Ring is, and like I'll never do a spoiler cast for this because I don't fucking know what happened in the games, to be totally honest.
I feel like I've had a couple of those
Yeah.
too where it's like, I'd like to talk about all the spoilers, but I'm just making shit up. So it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Spoilers starting now.
Yeah.
What exactly is this? Because you said it feels like they just keep making more Elden Ring. Is it just more continuation of the story? Is it endgame? Is it what exactly is this thing?
It's kind of like a weird side story. It's like really funny. So like there's a side optional boss in the base game that's protecting this character named Mikola. And in the base game, Mikola is just like a dead hand kind of like hanging out of this like weird cocoon thing. And like you just like didn't know what it is. So what happens is you touch that hand, you go to this new magical realm called, I think it's called like the Shadow Realm, like Yu-Gi-Oh. But like there is this one guy that they keep saying like, oh, Mikola, he was this like god that everybody loved, and Mikola he's trying to become a good god. And what Mikola is doing is he's traveling somewhere for some reason to become a god, and you keep seeing remnants of his like body parts that he's like leaving behind. So he's like, I leave my foot here, I leave my anger here, I leave this, because he's trying to become more godlike by like releasing all of his humanly attributes. And along the way there's now a group of people who are all from like different sects of Elden Ring who are all following Mikola for reasons. And the story sucks. It's bad. I didn't understand any of it more so than I normally. It doesn't work. The story, how they tell it, does not work like at all.
Okay.
It's a little bit different. So I've been thinking about this like a little bit because I think Elden Ring is probably my least favorite world. And one of the reasons for that is because I actually think this has a lot to do with like the George R.R. Martin aspect of the game, because in Elden Ring they basically George R. R. Martin wrote this like backstory of stuff that happened like 100 years prior to it, and it gives all these characters these interesting motivations and blah 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 blah. So all these characters have their own reasons for doing things, and then that is filtered through Souls like storytelling, which is like really kind of like giving you little spurts here and there of the story. So in previous Souls game without George R. R. Martin's involvement, the characters were not nearly as complicated. They didn't have like, they had very clear motivations. So when you're picking up like little pieces of Dark Souls stuff, you can kind of figure out their motivations because their motivations aren't that complicated. But the problem with Elden Ring is that they have really complicated motives for every single character. And then they spread all of this information across an open world that you're getting at different parts, like different pieces at a time. So it just makes it so, like going to any boss fight, I had like no context for like any of the boss fights. Anytime anything major happened, like why does this one side character like me and all of a sudden hate me so much they want to kill me? It's like, I don't know. I literally couldn't follow any of it. And it's different than like previous Souls games where you actually can follow along. I think Bloodborne's maybe the one that I had the hardest time with, but like Dark Souls 3 and 1 have like pretty straightforward stories compared to this one.
Is this a problem with Elden Ring proper or with the new stuff?
It's more a problem with this one, and because so in Elden Ring had like a really And that at least had like a kind of foundational story of the Elden Ring broke, and then there's like these 6 different guys who have all pieces of it, and you're trying to form it to become the Elden Lord, like real basic stuff. But in this one, like, it's not even clear like what the basic foundational plot of the story is, except following Mikola to do something. And like
that's never really revealed.
It is, and I just like didn't quite like. It's revealed in the Souls way, where like you kill a character and they're like, "Oh, sweet Mikola, I give my soul to you," sort of thing. And like, okay, cool. And like, and you meet like a lot of side characters, and like a lot of side characters are kind of like, "Oh, yes, I'm following Mikola. Isn't it weird that this guy from this troop is also following Mikola?" I was like, I don't know, man, maybe, sure, but like, it just like it's because they tried to have such a rich backstory that it just made it like just kind of this like mush sort of thing that like
they didn't quite know how to handle like the complex layers of everything else and interacting with everybody, and it just became a big blur of hopefully you caught this in the one part.
Yes, it like, and you went over to this dungeon and understood this piece of the story, and this dungeon this piece of the story. So I think like actually of all of the Souls game, this notably has like the worst story, like in my opinion. I'm sure there's a guy on YouTube who's like could tell you all the thing, but like I'll say with most of the other Souls game, I didn't feel like I needed to go to YouTube to like to understand like just the basics of the story.
Yeah.
And this one I did as a result. So that was disappointing, but everything else is amazing.
Okay, I was say, so if that's rough, then tell me the good stuff, because this is apparently like the greatest DLC, and it's incredible and amazing and ...
Well, yeah, it is funny because like usually start the story and it's just like actually that part's bad. No, so what the cool thing about this game is it's basically, so the best parts of Dark Souls, and I think that's the thing that's kind of like, there is a funny side of Dark Souls where they do like a lot of gotcha moments. And a gotcha moment can be like, hey, this boss has a second form that's like totally crazy unlike the first form. A gotcha can be like, oh, there's like a funny death because, oh, you've never seen a giant boulder in a Dark Souls game, and here's suddenly giant boulders falling down. She's like, what the hell am I doing? Kind of thing. So this game is like, it takes all of your presumptions about Elden Ring and does like kind of fun twists on it. So it's sort of like DLC where they're like, they've thought about this game for a long time. It's like, okay, now how can we do like every single cool aspect of Elden Ring? How can we reference that and then change it in unique ways? So like a really basic example is you have like these things called legacy dungeons. They're very similar to like a standard Dark Souls-y area. There's one that now you do entirely on horseback, which is just kind of silly and fun.
Okay.
But the other thing they do that I think is like really interesting is the map design is so cool. It rewards exploration unlike any game I've ever seen before. Every time you're like, I wonder, can I go to do that thing? It's like, yes, you can go do that thing. And then once you go to do that thing, you'll actually go, let's say, further down that thing, and you'll find another thing, and further down that thing, and further. There was this, I had gotten to the final boss, and what I was trying to do is like, I got to the final boss, and what I do with same thing I do with Elden Ring, I wanted to like just explore all of the areas. I want to at least see my map filled with like checkpoints to make sure I'd done everything.
Yep.
And I noticed this like one area hadn't. And I like went online, hey, how do I get to this like one little lower area? And they're like, okay, I just missed an elevator or something like that. I missed an elevator way back. And it was so crazy because I went down this elevator. I then come down to the secret swamp area that has this gigantic castle in it. I go through the gigantic castle. It's like, okay, cool. That was it. I'm done. All right, next. Okay, this is like again, I'll go back to the final boss. And as I was like turning around to go back, I was like, actually, like if I follow this river, like it looks like there's kind of like a ledge I can sort of like walk on, kind of. Mm-hmm. Like a ledge that kind of sticks out. Like okay, if you're like on a ledge that sticks out, in a game usually it's like okay, you go down a ledge, 3 feet down, there's an item. Yeah, it's like okay, I'll walk on this ledge. I'm like, but I like kept going, and like I had to get on horseback. I was going so far. I was like, okay, eventually this is gonna be turned. This will turn to nothing. And then I kept going, and all of a sudden, like, I entered, like, a dungeon I had never seen before. And I was like, okay, so how dungeons work in Elden Ring is they're kind of these cool sort of, like, catacomby areas that are very gameplay-focused. They have, like, a lot of fun traps. They have, like, a lot of, like, goofy enemies that are only in dungeons, but they're very, like, a sort of a singular experience. You do a dungeon. You, like, literally, when you beat the boss at the end of a dungeon, you warp back to the entrance.
Okay.
So then I did this dungeon, very cool. Killed this boss at the end. I was like, oh, great. And then there's a door behind the boss. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? You go through the door and all of a sudden you're in an underground forest and it's huge, like a humongous underground forest. And then like I was going through the underground forest. I ended up in like a dilapidated mansion library that I then went into. And then that had the final, like a different boss on it.
Oh, so like
and,
you basically, so the initial one was like a sub boss.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But like and so what it was just like, it was just kind of like, that experience of finding something cool behind a waterfall, it's just doing that all the time, but it's doing it like for like, no, we're gonna keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and
You're
deeper.
going through 4 waterfalls.
You're going through 4 waterfalls after you've gone through the first one. So it just feels like so rewarding doing every little like piece of this game. And I think that's just like why I kind of stuck around. It's like the story does nothing for me, but I just really like that it's just constantly rewarding you in interesting ways. One of the other fun ways that it plays with the player is and again, kind of like taking your expectations of Elden Ring. So how the map system works in Elden Ring is you'll get like a piece of a map, and then and so it kind of, how do you describe this? It's, imagine you have like a big sheet of paper of the map of Elden Ring. You just kind of like ripped off big chunks of it.
Okay.
So like you'll have like let's say I have like 4 of the 5 maps, and like there's this big chunk just kind of like missing from it.
Yeah.
How you find these maps in Elden Ring is, as you're kind of like exploring those areas, you'll see like a little map icon thing. It's like, okay, if I take my horse that area, I can grab the map and I'm good to go. And what they had done with this game though is they had that same sort of concept, but like I'd see the map icon of like where to find the map on my, on my empty map section, and I get there and all of a sudden there's just like a cliff. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like the thing should be like right in front of me, and I'm just staring down the cliff. So what this game has done is that the map is like literally miles tall. So you'll go down, like you'll go like super, super high in the air, like hundreds of stories high in the air, or you'll go so far down. So it's like actually kind of like this giant spire that you're going through. And it's just really, really cool kind of understanding how the map works, of like where it's like, oh, actually none of this is flat. It's all this like going like really far up and down, really. And it's like really, really fun. It's just a really fun map design because it like doesn't work the way you think at all. Where Elden Ring was like relatively flat, like almost like completely flat, like the entire map.
So the whole game takes place in like a tower?
No, it's like an Elden Ring land, but I'm just saying like how it's laid out. It's so tall.
That, I get you. Like you're like climbing up a mountain, and then you're going deep into like a canyon, and then okay.
But you're going up like miles up a mountain or a castle, and then going like miles down into like some deep decrepit thing. So it was just like the map was just laid out totally different, but it made exploring it like so much fun. It's probably like the most fun Souls game, I think, personally, because there's just so many little moments like all of the time where it's like I kind of said that like ledge example, it's like, oh, if I jump off here, I can kind of get down the staircase here, and like, oh, that opens up a totally different thing. And the thing is, like, because I know sometimes people are like afraid of like missing stuff, but there's so many cool little moments like that like even if I missed one, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I've hit like 20 other really interesting ones. That were just like really cool. And the other thing I really liked about the game too is, I don't know how they do this, but it feels like every single land that you go to has something like I've just never seen before. So for example, like in most like fantasy games, you're gonna have like your forest world, you're gonna have your Iceland, you're gonna have this. And Elden Ring had that. It's the base game. This did have that one, but this one just has like really just like unique areas. Like there's this one where like the game becomes like desaturated, and it just has the flowers that are lit up. So it's like this like black and white area with just like blue and red flowers. There's what's the other area I was thinking of? There's this area that like a large portion of the game takes place called the specimen chamber. I think I sent you some videos of it. And what
you sent me a lot of random.
I sent you a lot of videos.
Stuff that I don't know what it was.
And what the specimen chamber is, it's kind of like this like gross sort of like 1800. You know, like how like in 1800s and stuff, they have like skeletons and like mummies and stuff kind of displayed. And so it's this giant like almost like column like building. And they just have these gigantic hanging specimens that are kind of like a mix of like horse and people, but they're also like 3 or 4 stories high. And it just looks like so wrong and gross. I was like, oh, that's so cool. It's like and it's like also a library. So it always takes like these kind of like here's like the base idea. It's a library with some kind of like gross stuff. It's like, okay, but actually, how about we make the specimen that like gigantic things, and you kind of like crawl on them as like you're trying to get up the building. Like, I have to jump on the foot of this one to kind of climb up it to jump off the head and do all this other stuff. So it's just like really neat. Like, so like that's why like when I was playing the game, it's just like every single area I wanted to go to. And just because it would just be totally new, it'd just be something that was completely different from the rest of the game. It's like, so I never got to that point in the game where I just felt like I was seeing the same thing over and over again. I think Elden Ring did that really well, and Erdtree just like completely blew that out. If I do have like one criticism of it,
other than the story,
which is terrible, it's kind of a personal preference thing. So, and one of the reasons I don't like Elden Ring's world as much as some of the other ones is that it has this like really both like there's like a few factions, and they're all kind of like different diseases that are infecting the world of Elden Ring. There's like in the base game, there's like this like death disease. So there'd be like these like weird sort of like piles of skeletons with like eyes, with giant eyes sticking out. It's like, oh, it's kind of gross. And in this one, like if you have really, really high faith, like the greatest faith you can, you start growing like these gross horns, but they don't look like, so like the enemies have these like horrible, not like fun like ox horns, but these sort of like weird like diseased kind of like I don't know if you've ever actually seen like a picture of a real human horn. It's like, let's just inspire our whole area by that disgusting thing. So like all the enemies have these gross horns protruding out of them. Weird. And then the other sort of like faction is the fingers, and it's these weird fingers that like protrude out of the ground. And it's just this like really, it's just really kind of gross, and it's actually making me nauseous at some points when I was playing like certain parts of the game, because it has such a heavy focus on disease. There's just something like, I don't know, man, like even Bloodborne kind of had that, but like there's just something about this game where it's just so disease ridden and it's like 4 or 5 different diseases going on at like different periods of the game. It's just like, I get it, guys, like it's a cool inspiration, it has some like cool enemy designs as a result, but like straight up, so I was just like nauseating sometimes.
So overall, better or worse than base Elden Ring?
Oh, better for sure. For sure. Oh yeah, and like so clearly,
just because it's like a play on it. That's kind of like where your like ultimate is like, it's a play on it. It played with expectations. Like that's essentially like what you point to as why it's better.
That plus like just the level design is just so much more interesting. Like I was saying, like Elden Ring's just kind of like the thing with a basic Elden Ring thing, the map's really flat, and you go to a dungeon, and then the dungeon is the interesting thing. And in this one, it's like, what if we just made, and that kind of works like any open world, really. It's like the open world is kind of there, but like once you kind of get to the more narrowed, focused thing, that's the good part of the open world. Well, this one's just like, how about we make like it really feels like the open world is now a Dark Souls level. Okay. And that was like, and just, they had just kind of took that and spun it in so many different ways that it's like, probably level design, one of my, like very easily, probably like my favorite like level design I've ever seen in any game ever, because I've just never seen a game that rewards exploration as much as this one does. Actually, the whole way you even level up is exploring. You can't just like grind and get levels. They have a whole other separate system that you can only level up by finding pieces across the map. So like it's in your best interest to also explore.
Oh, that's cool.
So it has like a and it like if you get some of these things, it'll up all of your base stats by 10%, which is a ton. Yeah. And it's like, but then you can keep leveling up by 10%. So you're like by 200% or something by the end of like all your base stats. And the only way you can get that stuff is by exploring. So it's just like really cool that the game really forced you to explore. Some of the bosses are bullshit. But,
I mean, isn't that a general FromSoft thing?
Yeah, but like there's something really strange about how like the game, the first half of this, the first part of this DLC is so hard to the point I was thinking about quitting on like the second boss.
I do believe I got that text, yep.
Yeah. And it's just like easy street for like most of it until the final bosses. The final bosses are like a lot of people are like just quitting on the final boss. And I did that with Sekiro and I was fine with that. But like I was able to beat the DLC, but there's definitely points in the final boss is like, this kind of is not fun anymore. The way they figured out how to make Souls games harder now, like how do you keep a Souls game interested? Like how do you keep that same base combat for so many fights? Like what's the new thing? And their new way of making the game hard is that like after an attack, they'll do like a guy will do a sword swing and then after that sword swing, there'll be an explosion that kind of covers the screen in particles, so you can't see the next animation the guy's going to do. You just have to remember that he's going to do one.
So not like an AoE attack, just more like we're just going to make it so you can't see.
Yes, exactly. And they do that a lot in this game, where they put so much particle stuff on the screen so that like they're like making it not clear of what the boss is doing. And that just sucks because Souls games is like a lot of like looking at the animation of like, okay, I'm going to roll, roll. And like, it is a little bit of memorization, but it's mostly like, if you're just watching the animation, you can do it. Like you can figure out the rolls that you need, the correct rolling that you need to do. But like in this one, it just does like so much like, obfuscation. Is that the word? Of just like, sure. I'm just making it hard to see the boss. And it's just not, it's just not a fun way to do difficulty. So I was really struggling with those first two bosses because I also hadn't done a lot of exploring. So I didn't have like that, whatever that cool leveling system was, to the point I was quitting. But then like once you get over that hump, and it's like with most Souls games, once you get over a specific hump, it's actually like pretty fun and relaxing. Like I find this game, like actually, I always find Souls games pretty relaxing and fun.
That's almost infuriating to hear.
Some people play these games like, I don't even know if they like it. Like they're just like, I just want, like I remember I was seeing a tweet the other day. It's like someone's like, I wanted to beat Elden Ring just to see if I could. And I was just like, that is the wrong mindset to go in these games. My favorite part of these games is exploring for hours and hours and seeing cool stuff. Like the combat I enjoy the combat, but I wouldn't say like the hard part, like the game, the fact that it's hard is
not the draw.
No, like not even close. And I just feel like that's this thing that you just keep hearing about with like Souls games. Like they're so hard. It's like, yeah, but there's so much other cool stuff going on.
Yeah, but like when I played Elden Ring, the thing that prevented me from having fun and exploring was that it was hard and I sucked at it. So I played for a few hours like, this is too hard and I suck at it. Well, guess I'm not going to see the cool stuff because it's too hard.
Yeah, that's true. And like there's ways around that, but there are sometimes you just kind of need to beat your head against a boss for a little bit to figure out how it works before you actually overcome it. And there's definitely a few bosses I was definitely beating my head against a wall in ways I have not done in a long time for Souls games. But I love this. But I always love this stuff. Awesome DLC. Like it's just like I said, it's just as if not better than the base game in a ton of different ways. Yeah.
Which is hard to do for a DLC.
Yeah. Especially since Elden Ring was already so good. Like, it's already one of the best games ever made.
10 out of 10, the 10 out of 10 greatest game of all time. You just did it again. Good job. For $40 in a smaller version. And it's just Insane. Well, we are Workforce Gaming. Leave a comment below. Subscribe to our channel. There's a link to support us on Coffee as well. We'll see you later.
Bye.